do this.
All right.
Ready? Ready?
I was born ready.
Rafi's Rambles, Rafi's Rambles, Rafi's Rambles.
Hola, you amazing artist, and welcome to the plumbing hole that is my life. So a lot of the questions and comments that we've seen over the years have to do with questioning whether or not your art is art. We've already done several videos on this subject, which basically if you are creating something and you deem that it is art, then it is indeed art. I want to do a video discussing some of the more interesting reasons why it is that the general public will think that something is art. And because of that, make a distinction that this thing is art, but this thing is not art. And honestly, it's just a big clusterfudge out there of interpretations of things and half information, half truths, and just not really having a direct idea of the simplicity of what an art creation is. So the first one is that most people think that something is art when they are told that it is art. This is one of the reasons that a lot of people that I've interacted with will tell me, well, I'm not really an art person. I don't really know what art is, as if art is this mysterious thing and you really need someone to come and tell you whether or not this painting or this sculpture or this whatever creation it is a work of art. One of the reasons for this is despite popular belief, experts actually make us really dumb.
I love listening to an expert talk about whatever. Like, it's an enjoyable experience, but it is good to be aware that sometimes we're like, okay.
It's interesting because there have been a few studies done where they have connected the brain to the brain connecty things, and an expert would come into the room and start advising people on like financial decisions or whatever it was. And what they realized was that the thinky parts of our brain, the part that allows us to make decisions, would actually flatline. You know what? You see, the world has changed. Do you notice all my awards? I'm an expert.
Okay.
And the world has changed.
It has changed.
You don't have to do dart shows anymore.
I don't have to do dart shows anymore.
The truth of the matter is that a lot of people walk around claiming that they're experts, especially in something that is as subjective as art, and telling people, well, this is art, this is not real art. People just kind of blindly agree with some idiotic idea that like somebody that creates art is not actually an artist, or an artwork that somebody created is not art. The thing about it is that we all have that little expert inside of our head too, that like you hear a famous name like Picasso. Well, if it's something that Picasso created, then it's art. If you look at a trash can and you realize that this trash can was designed by Dali, does it go from being a trash can to actually being art now? And all of that depends on what the little expert in your own head is saying.
And more importantly, what would be inside the trash can designed by Dali?
Surreal trash.
Andy Warhol's art. Didn't he urinate on a piece of Andy Warhol's
yeah,
art?
he did.
And Andy Warhol
brought him art, and Dali got up and urinated on it. And then Andy Warhol was like, that's acceptable.
I'm going to keep this.
Yeah. A lot of times we believe what this expert says, and they're just as confused as everyone else out there. And that's when I like to call it the stick man. The stick man that is giving you really bad advice on how your artwork may not be artwork because it doesn't meet some lame criteria out there. The second one that I find absolutely fascinating is how people will associate things to art depending on where it's shown and how it's shown. There's this awesome story of a glove that fell on the floor. I believe it was at MoMA. People were like kind of carefully walking around it because they weren't sure if it was an exhibit or if somebody just dropped their glove.
Yeah, and no one even stopped to consider how the glove felt about any of it. Maybe it was like, help me.
My partner is gone. It is the perception out there that in these places, like if you have your artwork in these places, that now you're legit, now you are really an artist, and now what you have to show is really art. I remember when I became part of a gallery, which the gallery will remain unnamed, but I didn't feel much like an artist in this gallery. And Clee's mom had come into town and she saw my artwork up at a gallery, and at that moment she was like, oh, Rafi, you finally made it.
I know, and then I felt her eyes shift over to me like, what have you done with your life?
We have an artist friend who creates amazing, beautiful work. And her mom is very supportive, but her mom is constantly telling her, like, you need to be in a gallery, you need to be in a museum. She was feeling a little bad about that. Like, hey, mom, I don't care about being in a gallery or in a museum. I'm selling my artwork. I'm doing well. Like, I don't need that to feel successful. But her mom just kept saying it. Recently, Carnegie Museum actually contacted her because they were interested in some pieces. So, like, she's going to have some artwork in a museum. At that point, she's like, well, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say no, but all she could think of was the fact that, like, finally she could just tell her mom, like, listen, I'm in a museum now. The third phenomenon when it comes to art that's interesting is the fact that the more you see a work of art, the more that you start to associate it to art. So for example, if you see a piece of art in a documentary and then you see it in a magazine and you see it somewhere else, the more times that you see it and the more times that it's told to you that it's art, you start to actually believe that it's art. It's a weird phenomenon that happens in our brain. It's one of the things that marketers use. It's the reason that there are so many repetitive commercials that come on. It's kind of like when you love a song and then you go out and you buy the album and you listen to the album and you realize that that's the only song on that album that you like, but then it just kind of plays on repeat in your car, and anytime you go anywhere it just plays on repeat, and basically after about 2 weeks, like, you love the entire album. It's kind of like that. The more that you see it, the more that you listen to it, the more that you like it.
Pretty much every album in history was like that for me and you.
Yeah,
right?
Every album I got, I get it home and be all excited to listen. I was like, these songs suck.
And then the very next week you were like, this is my favorite album.
Yeah, I was like, hey, have you heard this? You gotta listen. And probably if they hadn't heard it yet, they were sitting in there like, these songs suck. The other one that's fascinating, and it's actually a social experiment that I want to do in the future, is the fact that our brains are constantly trying to solve something. And when it comes to art, sometimes we may look at something and assume that it's art, and it may just not be art. For example, the glove that was on the floor and people not really sure if it was art.
That poor glove has lost its anonymity forever. That glove can't go out in public anymore without getting mauled by adoring fans.
That's not how it works for artists. We don't get mauled by adoring fans. I've had people come in and they're like, I love that painting. And I'm like, oh, do you? They're like, yeah. Do you know the artist? I always love when people would come into our booth and they would be like, excuse me, do you work here?
Yeah, I loved that question too. And I would always be like,
Yes, I do.
I do.
There was also a prank done by a teenager where he took his glasses off and he put them on the floor and then put like a little description card up on the wall, and people literally were stopping and taking pictures and like really examining it, thinking that it was a piece of art. Because we're used to interacting with art, a lot of times we'll see something random and we'll be like, what do you think that is? What is that supposed to be? I don't know. Let me look at it. If any of you guys have the same idea I have, then we're going to be visiting a lot of big name museums in the future.
I think I'm seeing some maroon colored bandanas on some marble statues in our future.
Oh, that's going to be amazing. We're going to all the museums that have marble statues.
Well, then you're going to have to edit this part of the video out so that we don't self-incriminate.
We're artists. Anonymity, remember? Nobody knows who the hell I am.
Who made that? I don't know, some guy.
Some guy with a bandana. The fifth thing, and this one is super fascinating to me, is called the Mona Lisa effect. One of the interesting things about the Mona Lisa is that the Mona Lisa was relatively boring, like unknown, like nobody really knew what the Mona. It's not like people went to the museum to go see the Mona Lisa the way that they do now, because it was just another old painting by some old dead guy. It actually wasn't until the Mona Lisa got stolen and started coming out on the media, and in America it was called like the most expensive painting ever stolen. That's when it became popular. It became so popular that people wrote songs about it. There was merchandise. In fact, the Mona Lisa has been associated as one of the greatest paintings out there because of all the publicity that the Mona Lisa got.
Yeah, Mona Lisa's an interesting one. I wonder to myself, like, what grade do you think your high school art teacher would have given you if you had painted the Mona Lisa?
I mean, if I painted the Mona Lisa, you know what? I'm so ingrained by it that in my brain, I'm like,
it would have been a revelation, but most likely, let's say the Mona Lisa didn't exist and you painted that in high school. Like, I think my art teacher would have been like,
your art teacher would have been like, where are her eyebrows? Where are your eyebrows?
You might want to...
When you think about these 5 things and you think about a banana being duct taped to a wall or an invisible sculpture, I love calling those things like the art social experiment, where you go out there and you push the boundaries on what people believe art is because they've been told what art is for such a long time that they're not sure what art actually is. All these things that in some way, shape, or form don't make sense. But when you're looking at just about anything, whether it is the design of a guitar or the design of just about anything that's out there in the world, it was designed by an artist. It's mass produced. It's not necessarily considered art, but when you look at the design, is it art? That's where all this confusion comes in. So whether an expert is coming by and giving us dumb advice on what is art and what isn't art and who is an artist and who is not an artist, it's actually self-promotion in of itself to make them seem like they're an expert, which will make them seem more like an expert. That's the irony of this whole thing.
To be honest, I kind of love the bananas mystery and shenanigans of the art world. It's part of its charm.
I think the fact that people get mad about it and they argue back and forth, that's all part of that promoting it. If nobody was arguing about it, nobody would really know. There'd be one article and then that was it. But because everybody was arguing, then there were more articles. And honestly, I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's kind of fun to ponder and debate and question, and people even get into like heated arguments about bananas duct taped to the wall.
I love that aspect of doing something like that where it is a social experiment. Like, dude, bandanas on marble statues, that's going to happen. It's not going to be bananas duct taped, it'll be bandanas duct taped.
The bandana's social experiment.
When it comes down to it, most high art, whenever you hear the term high art, has to do more with like media exposure and promotion. If you're comparing yourself to other artists that have their artwork out in the media, you got to understand that a lot of it just doesn't make sense. People are going to love what you create. They're going to love what you make. Some people are not going to like it. Some people are going to hate it. Some people are going to be meh about it. It doesn't matter. What does matter is, as long as you're putting your stuff out there, not why they think art is art or whether or not your art is art. Don't have those insecurities because ultimately they don't matter. Whatever you create, you're putting it out there, and that's all that matters. Honestly, all the other reasons on why people think art is art are ridiculous. So yeah, I said it.
One thing is for sure. If a tree happens to grow up through the floor of a museum, it is, by its very nature, art.
And that's it, you guys. That's all I have for you today. It's been a long day. We've been dealing with a lot of plumbing issues, and hopefully there is a light at the end of the tunnel, which one way or another, there will be. And I want to give a big thank you to our patrons. They're the reasons that we're able to do these videos. And a big shout out to Brandy Shabaga. She's a contemporary mixed media artist and earth scientist from Canada. She also loves experimenting with her art and incorporating other elements into it. She is awesome. I love her work. Check her out if you get the chance. And I'm curious to know if you guys have any other reasons why sometimes people think art is art. Go ahead and leave that in the comment section below. Even though nobody out there knows who you are, would you like to say goodbye to all the amazing people that are out there?
But what is a good day? Oh, no. Is it a good day or is it not? Well, I guess either way, good day.
And thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are absolutely freaking amazing. I totally adore you. And if you like this and you want to watch more like this, just click right over here to subscribe. And other than that, have a fantastic weekend, you guys. Adios.